back to the On the Ball podcast. This is another episode of the best podcast in town. Apologies for the lack of content recently. I had a short break after university exams. Went on a week getaway to Tassie. I did a Euros episode, but not obviously a rugby league one. And I think Rowie, the friend of the show, did an AFL one, so he kept that pumping out. So we haven't missed a week in AFL, but sadly we did miss a week of NRL. So we're back into it this week. I'm back into my rhythm, so there will be AFL and NRL out weekly, and then a few soccer ones here and there and some other sports. But we've missed a lot, really. We missed State of Origin too, and I didn't miss it, but I've missed it on the podcast so far. So that's what I'm going to touch on first, and then we're going to look ahead to round 16. Will just be a preview today. Obviously, there's not really any NRL action to review. I'm not going to chat about 2 weeks ago. So it feels a bit weird, this mid-season break almost. It's kind of like I don't actually remember too much. Well, as a Tigers fan, I think I sort of blocked out the last round. Obviously, that historic loss to the Storm. But, well, once we watch this round of footy, I'm sure we'll get back into it and the momentum will start to pick up again. So on the Friday night, we had the Women's State of Origin. I have to say, I feel really sorry for the girls. The weather just did not turn up for them. I was really excited for it. Thought it was going to be a really good event. Sunshine Coast Stadium, I thought was a good venue for them, a good size. There wasn't going to be many COVID restrictions, and it's a knowledgeable, rugby league heartland, southeast Queensland. So. I thought it was going to be really exciting, but then the weather really just affected the game. Really hard to. It's a low scoring in general women's rugby league anyway, and they play less minutes. But the weather just prevented all sort of flowing footy, and it was pretty error prone game. New South Wales made a lot of mistakes, and Queensland, the underdogs, won shockingly yet again in the women's Origin. I swear they're underdogs every year, much like the men's, and they seem to get up and win, and the Broncos do the same thing in the NRLW, so they're on fire. Disappointing from the New South Wales girls. I know the coach said in the press conference that, they just let themselves down with those errors. Controversial penalty to win the game. Look, I probably did. It probably is a penalty, to be honest, any other time in the game, so I do get why they gave it up. She could have been milking, but it did look like there was a bit of a leg grab, and rather than focusing on the dive, you've probably just got to think, why has the New South Wales interchange forward put a hand in there? There's a minute left or 2 minutes left or whatever it was, 10 minutes. I actually can't remember how much to go there was, but it ended up being the final act in terms of scoring, and that was pretty deflating. But thankfully, it didn't affect the men's momentum. Rolled into Sunday night. I was very nervous because New South Wales has led me to a lot of false hope in my 20 years on this planet, but this was one time where it wasn't false, it was true hope. It's one of the best series wins New South Wales had in the last 20 years. Very comprehensive. Obviously, Queensland had a lot of issues with injury, and their depth was lack of depth was exposed, but New South Wales, you got to hand it to them. They just looked a class above, as they probably should with the side they've got, but this has been the tale of Origin since the beginning. New South Wales have always had the more star-studded team, except for that 8-year stretch for Queensland. But Queensland's always had a lack of depth just through lack of players, but they've always, fought hard against this who some would call arrogant New South Wales Blues side, and that's kind of the narrative that has made this rivalry so great. But for once, New South Wales actually stood up and showed that they were too classy for the Queensland outfit on this occasion. Just everyone played really well. Latrell, I thought he should have been man of the match over James Tedesco, to be honest. I know Teddy was huge throughout the whole 80, but I thought Latrell set up the first two tries with the strip and then the intercept. And I think when Queensland went 2 tries down, I think it was all but over for me. It wasn't until the third try where I was really like, all right, it would be a miracle if we lose from here. But when we scored the first 2, the odds of Queensland were really looking low, and they would have had to have come out hard and score early, and I think take us by surprise to win that game too. Obviously, after getting pummeled in game 1, but so I thought those 2 acts from Latrell were enough to get him man of the match, and I also think he was pretty stiff in the first one. I think he was arguably better than Turbo, but Yeah, right now he's looking like winning the player of the series, so I think he would take that over an individual man of the match. But he's been huge in the centres, and I'm quite scared the form he's in rolling into Tigers Rabbitohs on the weekend. I know he's playing a different position, but still he's in frightening form. But yeah, it was just a really good game. The first 20 minutes were really competitive. And then, as I mentioned, New South Wales, I guess you could say lucky breaks, but not so much. It was just sort of against the momentum, the strip, and then the intercept. So the game went from being 50-50, and at times Queensland did dominate, but New South Wales just had better execution with their chances. And then, yeah, it was over by halftime, really. I just think New South Wales were too good in the attacking third. You'd have to say that's where Queensland really struggled. I think missing Harry Grant and Kalen Ponga was massive. I know it's only two players, but I do think they would have not leveled the series, but like given Queensland a serious chance. I think Munster was left to do a lot on his own. He's copped a lot of criticism, but I think he's not match fit at the moment. Not in terms of like uh, aerobic capacity or whatever, but like actually in terms of form. Like he hasn't played much footy in the last 2-3 months, so I'm not really surprised that he didn't tear it up. Cherry Evans didn't look great, but we've seen with Manly when he's not got a like he's better off as every half is and hooker is and fullback is. He's better off the back of a charging forward pack with stars around him like Turbo at Clubland, and when they're out, he often does struggle to create and also game manage. So he kind of struggled with that with no Ponga, Grant, and Munster out of form. But yeah, I think there's no issues there. I think people are stressing about Queensland, saying, "Oh, this is going to be like 10 years of dominance from New South Wales." But realistically, in State of Origin, rarely does a period of dominance happen. That 8 year Queensland streak contained probably 3 or 4 immortals. So I don't think we're going to see that ever again. And I think people who are stressing out about the state of Queensland football just need to take a step back and go, they actually won last series. They've got the two best under 20s players in the competition right now, and Reece Walsh and Sam Walker. So, yeah, I don't think, and Harry Grant's only 23 months, to still got a lot to go. Ponga's still very young. So I don't think there's any stresses there. Some of the fringe players in the Queensland squad maybe show that they just weren't up to the standard. I hate to pick on him, but yeah, Kyle Felt, I have to say it's probably one of the worst 2 game performances I've ever witnessed. Like, he's probably worst on in both, and that's pretty hard to do as a winger because you normally don't have much impact. But a lot of people were calling for his selection. I was glad that Ronaldo got selected. I sort of predicted that at the start of last season. I thought he'd be an Origin winger in the next 2 to 3 years. Obviously, didn't get his chance to play because of the eligibility scandal, but hopefully he plays in Game 3 for his sake. I think he'll make a bit of a difference with his passion and enthusiasm, but I don't know. It'll be interesting to see what happens. No one knows where it's going to be played. Talks of Melbourne, talks of Newcastle, talks of small country towns. With Sydney's lockdown status at the moment, I would like it in Melbourne so I can go watch it, but that's just a selfish point. I don't know where it should be. It'd be pretty crazy if they don't play a single game in New South Wales and it's a clean sweep. But I do expect Queensland to bounce back. I think once Munster gets a bit more form under the belt, Ponga will probably be fit as he's playing for Newcastle this weekend. Harry Grant might be fit by then as well. And then all of a sudden, I think they pose a lot bigger threat to us, New South Welshmen. So, yeah, great series win from Freddie and the boys. Hopefully, he can get the clean sweep, but I have to say, I'm not that bothered to get back Game 3 at the moment. I'm sort of just excited to get back into the NRL week after week until finals. And yeah, that's my State of Origin review. Moving into my NRL preview, I'm just going to go game by game, chat about the ins and outs, and give my tip. Nothing too hectic, but as I mentioned, there's been no NRL footy for about 2 weeks now, so some of this stuff's a little bit rusty. But I'm not going to talk about the Thursday night game because I'm recording this 3 hours before that game, so this will probably be going out Friday morning, if not Thursday night after the match. So I won't bother touching on that one. Hopefully it's a good game. And hopefully the Roosters challenge the Storm, but we'll see what happens. I'm not sure if the Origin players will play, but we'll see. So Friday, 6 o'clock game, we're starting with the Warriors Dragons. Warriors have some big team changes. Reece Walsh is obviously out. That hamstring injury he suffered in the Queensland captain's run has limited his ability to front up for the Warriors here. Not sure how long he's going to be out for, and I would like to know because he's in my fantasy team, but for now, I think I'm just going to hold him. But yeah, for the Warriors, that's not ideal. But yeah, I think they've got to take a conservative approach with him. He's still only very, very young, and soft tissue injuries we've seen in the past, players can, not get, I was going to say get addicted to them, but like they can get one hamstring and then that can lead to three out of 4 or 5 year span. So yeah, I think they should be very conservative with that one. And then on top of that, Josh Curran and Ewan Aitken are out. They were in a COVID hotspot, so they have to isolate for 14 days, which hurts. However, for the Warriors, Dallin Watene with Zalesniak will make his debut for the club on the wing. He's obviously been signed from the Doggies. And Chad Townsend, who's coming in for half a season before going to North Queensland, is making his debut in the half as well. Well, I guess, is it your debut if you've played for the club before? I'm not sure, but yeah, it's going to be exciting to see how they go. Chad Townsend hasn't played much footy in the last 8 weeks with the Sharkies. Halves going well. So that's going to be interesting to see how that affects the side. They're obviously in interesting form. They kind of seem to rock up when people don't expect them to rock up, and then vice versa. But Wade Egan and Bunty Afoa also returned, so they're slowly getting back to full strength. I think people have sort of overlooked the injury issues the Warriors have had this year. Obviously, right now, it comes to my mind, I think Peter Hiku's out for the year. Chanel Harris-Tavita's out for the year. Now Curran and Aitken are out. Walsh is out with a hamstring. And they've sort of been dealing with 3 or 4 injuries to starters each week. And I think maybe because the Warriors don't get the same spotlight as some of the big Sydney and Brisbane teams. But yeah, I think that needs to be appreciated. And a little bit of slack has to be cut for them, but they're still well and truly in that hunt for the top 8. And this was a big game for them, for both these teams, actually. The Dragons, on the flip side, they are inside the top 8 right now. And these are the games they need to win to stay in there. To be honest, they probably don't deserve to play finals at this rate. But if they just keep picking up wins against teams like the Warriors, they're probably just going to find themselves in there by virtue of everyone else being so inconsistent around that mark. Josh Moose Maguire comes back from suspension. Terrell Fuimaono comes back for his first game since Magic Round, and Matt Duffy returns from injury. So that's some big ins for the Dragons. Their bench has been boosted massively with that, and Duffy obviously at the back. Although Tyrell Sloan was very, very exciting on debut, Duffy certainly brings a lot more to that side. So to tip this one, for me, it's a flip of a coin. I think the odds are tilted towards the Warriors. It's in Gosford, so I do tend to lean to the Warriors. So I'm probably just going to say the Warriors by 2. I think it'll be a close game. Dragons are pretty inconsistent. 1 week they'll rock up. They beat the Raiders in Canberra, I think it was, and then they lose to the Tigers and Bulldogs. So they're a very unpredictable team. I think the Warriors are a little bit more predictable. You sort of know you're just going to get a 7 out of 10 performance. So I'm going to trust the Warriors even with Reece Walsh out. Hopefully Townsend lights it up on debut. Roger back at fullback, and I'm going to go the Warriors by 2 points. Panthers versus Eels is the primetime game. We're treated to some blockbusters this weekend, which is a good way to get the momentum of the competition back up and running. Nathan Cleary is obviously out for up to a month with his shoulder injury. Origin has not been kind to Cleary this year. Obviously, he suffered the cheekbone in game 1, and now he's suffered what some are saying could be a season-ending injury, but he looks like he's going to play through it after a month off. Dylan Edwards is also out. He's battling issues with injury throughout this whole year and hasn't been able to get 3 or 4 games together, which is frustrating for him. So Staines goes to number 1. Burton goes to the 6th. They still look a very good side. Eels are pretty much unchanged. I think Sevo comes back from suspension maybe. But yeah, they're pretty much full strength. It's at Bluebet Stadium. Look, I think the Eels are a real chance here, and I believe the Eels might have, before the Tigers, but I think the Eels were the last team to beat Penrith in a regular season game, if I'm not mistaken, in about round 10 last year. But that was at Bankwest. Bit of a different story. I think the Panthers are a better side now, and I'm going to say the Panthers by 10. I just can't tip against Panthers or Storm at the moment, especially when they're at home. So yeah, I'm going to say Panthers. Bulldogs Seagulls is the early Saturday game. Flanagan comes back into the side. There's mass changes for the Bulldogs. I'm not going to go through them all, obviously, 5 or 6 players. breached COVID rules and went to a pub in the eastern suburbs of Sydney. So that's pretty disappointing from an NRL's point of view, but Manly are laughing, really. The Bulldogs aren't the strongest of sides, even though they're in decent form, but to lose 4 or 5 players in their starting team, it's going to be very, very tough. So Flanagan comes back in at 6, so he's going to partner Averillo in the halves. Jackson, I don't know. I need to work out how to say it. I don't know if it's Topine or Topine. I'm going to say Topine. He's starting in the second row, which is actually his natural position. He's played a few games at hooker, a few off the bench, but he's actually a back rower. That's where he played growing up for the Doggies. So that's going to be exciting because he's a highly touted youngster. Seagulls are pretty much unchanged. They're without Jake Trebojevic, who's still injured after, I don't know, I think he was injured after game 1 of Origin. I'm not sure. Maybe it was the Manly game after that, but he's still out. But apart from that, they're pretty much full strength. So you've got to go the Seagulls here. One of the form team in the comp against one of the bottom teams in the comp. Hopefully the Bulldogs put up a fight, but I can't see it being pretty. So I'm going to get the Sea Eagles by 30 points here. Raiders versus Titans. Jared Croker comes back, the skipper for the Raiders. He's back in the centres. Matthew Tomoko drops to the reserves. That's really the main ins for the Raiders. For the Titans, they have a lot of ins, actually. Similar to the Warriors, I think people have overlooked some of their injury issues this year. AJ Brimson comes back at fullback, which sees Campbell pushed to the reserves. Corey Thompson comes back on a wing. Kevin Proctor comes back. Bo Firma comes back, and Sam Lasone, who adds a lot of bench production, really, for them as a big front row who comes on. Their bench is pretty stacked this week. I think Fodderwake is starting from there. So this is a tough one. It's in Canberra. The Titans have lost their last 4, I believe. So I'm actually going to go with the Titans for a comeback win. Obviously, had a fair few players involved in that Queensland, both Queensland drubbing so far. So I think they're going to be fired up. The Raiders have started to look a little bit better the last couple of weeks, and it is in Canberra. But I'm going to say the Titans come out and snap this losing streak. I still think they're a very good chance of making finals, and these are the sort of games they need to win. And I just don't trust the Raiders at the moment with their inconsistent. They're sort of been consistently just average. So, I'm going to say the Titans, but I'm not confident on that one. Knights versus Cowboys is the Saturday primetime game. Kalen Ponga will finally play his first game since I think it's round 9. He's been named a couple times, been laid out a couple times. So it's going to be the first time Knights fans get to see Ponga, Pearce and Clifford all together, which is, we're not sure on the future of Pearce, but it looks to be the short-term future of the Knights in terms of the spine. So that's going to be exciting. And even more exciting is it's against Clifford's old team, the new North Queensland Cowboys. So that's going to be entertaining. Big battle up against his opposition half, Tom Dearden. He's basically the reason Clifford was shipped off, I guess. So that's going to be a little bit of a juicy battle between those two. I think the Knights, this is tough because the Cowboys, they're one of those teams that, similar to the Warriors, where you always tip against them and they always get the upset. But it's the Knights. Ponga's back, and it's at McDonald Jones. So I think I'm going to have to go the Knights for a big Saturday primetime game. Todd Payton's isolating as well. That might have some sort of impact, but who knows? So I'm going to go Ponga to lead the boys to a dub. I'm going to say the Knights by 6, but that could be an entertaining game because the Cowboys actually playing a lot of tight, high-scoring games. Sunday, 2 o'clock kickoff, Broncos versus Sharks. A lot of changes for the Broncos, similar to the Bulldogs, but these ones were, not like all, they weren't all unforced, but they weren't through like suspension or anything. Stags comes back at centre, Oates and Osako on the wing, so a bit of a throwback to like 2018, I think it was, when they were the wingers. Gamble and Croft pair each other in the halves. I don't know if they've paired each other yet, but that could be one of another halves pairing. And TC Rabadi gets the start at the number 12 as Pangai Jr. is suspended. Rabadi's looked really exciting in his first few appearances off the bench for the Broncos, so I think that could be an interesting aspect to watch. Going to be interesting to see how Stags goes. Obviously, some talk about him coming back at number 6, whether he's going to play number 6 next year. As I'm recording this, Kurt Capewell just got announced a couple hours ago as a big signing for them next week. So I don't know. I feel like it's not positive at Red Hill for the Broncos, but I feel like there's a little bit less negativity around them. Some of their big guns are back from injury, or just Stags. I don't know. I'm trying to hype them up, but yeah, it's tough to. And then the Sharks are pretty much unchanged, and they're in really good form. So as much as well, I don't know if I'd like to see it, but as much as I think it would be heartwarming to see the Broncos finally get a dub and Kevin Walters can finally smile. But I'm going to say the Sharkies. I think they're in really, really good form, and they look like a bit of a smoky to make that top 8 after a poor first 10 rounds. So I'm going to say the Sharks. Yeah, I just think they're a more settled team, less moving parts. So I'm going to say the Sharks by 12 in that one, which would be a punter's nightmare, given the 1 to 12, 13 plus margins. But anyway, and then Sunday afternoon, my team play the old enemy, the South Sydney Rabbitohs. Speaking of the Rabbitohs, I have to say, he was a lovely man on a Tasmanian road trip. He was just working in a cafe off the side of the highway. People, stop and have a stretch. And he was a legend. He was a Rabbitohs fan. I was wearing my Tigers hat, and he stopped me for a chat. And yeah, great bloke. But anyway, only a couple changes to the Tigers, which I have to say my family's pretty disappointed at. I was saying to my dad, if there's one thing I'd have to say about Maguire is he is very stubborn about his team changes. So I was saying, I don't think he should get sacked or anything like a lot of people are saying, but I was mentioning that if he doesn't make changes after that Storm loss, like that will be a big negative in the column for Madge for me, because yeah, that's just something that I don't rate in a coach. I know he's trying to like pick and stick, fulfill some confidence. They won back-to-back games only a couple rounds ago, but after 2 really, really poor performances, some changes do have to be made, and I think he's gone pretty weak on that. I think he's stuck by some of his signings for a little bit too long. I think Tamo and James Roberts in particular have been really, really average. But Tommy Talau's out, which is good. He's just got some of the worst ball handling you'll ever see. Dewey's back, which is a huge in. And Seyfarth pushes into the starting 13, which has been long deserved, really, the last 6 weeks. I think he's been one of our best forwards week in, week out. And he seems like one of the very few Tigers players who consistently has a crack and goes at 100% intensity all the time he's on the field. For the Souths, all their origin stars are named. They've got an extended reserves list, so we'll have to wait and see about that as that kind of goes for the whole weekend. Benji Marshall and Liam Knight are back on the bench. That's some big names. Hammy Sele, I think it's how you pronounce it. He's starting at prop over Tom Burgess, which is interesting. But yeah, look, you got to tip the Rabbitohs. I reckon it might be close. The first time these played this year, it went to the Golden Point. But yeah, just the Tigers aren't in great form. The Rabbitohs are in decent form. Got to say the Rabbitohs, even though it is at Leichhardt, there's no fans or anything. So yeah, I don't think that'll have much of an effect. So I'm going to say the Rabbitohs by 18. That could be rose-coloured lenses from me looking at that one. But yeah, so going through my game picks then, I know I've just said my 7 tips, not including Thursday night, but I will say my sure bet of the week, and that is it's actually tough. Well, based on margins, it's the Seagulls to beat the Bulldogs, so that's going to be my sure bet of the week. I'm going to back in the Hello Sport boys from the Bloke in a Bar podcast and get around their Manly Seagulls. Upset of the week, look, I'll be honest, I don't actually know who are underdogs in the clashes. So that's a bit silly for me not knowing that, but I would say the Titans might be decent value against the Raiders. I might just quickly check that. Yeah, just having checked that, the Titans are big underdogs actually at 250, so that'll be my upset of the week. That's also the line I'll suggest. I think the line's about 8 points, so at the time recording it's actually 6.5, so I'd say put that in your multis. Apart from that, the other lines aren't that interesting to me. It's pretty similar to all the margins I've tipped, so I'd probably steer clear for this week. But yeah, it's going to be an interesting round, obviously. Sort of the NRL has almost had a 2-week break, essentially, except for the Origin players. So it's going to be good to see a little sneak peek in how the teams are going for the last 10 rounds of the competitions leading into finals. It's going to be a really, really interesting 4 or 5 weeks, especially in that battle for 7th and 8th. I think the top 6 is all but decided, and that 7th and 8th positions are up for grabs. Anyone can take them. like I would say that Bulldogs and Broncos are the only teams ruled out. And I know I'm a optimistic Tigers fan saying that, but like it's definitely not out of the picture for the Tigers or anyone that low to win it. As I know the Tigers have a pretty soft draw themselves, and I'm sure other teams are in a similar situation. So it's going to be really exciting to see who takes those positions out. And the way, look, some of the top 14s are playing really well, but some of them, like the Roosters and stuff, aren't necessarily dominating week in, week out. So, seventh and eighth position could be a nice spot to land this year, given the unpredictability of pretty much every team except for the top two. So, yeah, hopefully I'll get those 7 from 7 right, because I am currently trying to chase down my cousin at the top of the tipping leaderboard. But if you've enjoyed it, let me know. Leave a like, comment, let me know on my Instagram DMs, whatever you want to do. Follow us on Spotify. Thanks for sticking with us. Looking forward to bringing out a lot more NRL content over the next 10 weeks. And yeah, feel free to go back and listen to other NRL videos or whatever you want to do. Feel free to check out the soccer and AFL content. And for now, all I'll say is enjoy the footy. Hopefully, last night's game was a thriller, the Storm Roosters, and hopefully there's 7 more thrillers to come. But yeah, go the Blues, go the Tigers, and see you next week. Cheers.